Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring it to our home and yours. And I'm Thomas McCuddy.
And I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
And I'm Nick Wiegand. And today we get to discuss the idea of family goals. And we had been talking about it a little while ago, how you guys had brought this up with other families, and it had just dumbfounded them. They had never really thought about it. And so let's start out with why family goals. Like, what is the point?
And it seems obvious, and when you think about the question, because we tend to just we get married and we have children, and then we just kind of just go about the system set up that way, and like they go to school, they go to college, and we kind of leave it to that. And I think that's kind of like for a lot of families is just the idea of setting up a goal that what does that even mean? What kind of goal? And I think as Christians, especially, we need to, focus on the bigger picture. We need to focus on, what does it mean to be like Jesus? Is that really your goal of your family? Is that really what you're trying to achieve? Or is it just to have that surface level where I can go out, I can go through school, and my kids, they're all successful. They all got jobs. Is that really the most important thing in their lives? Is it really bringing them true happiness? Is it really, are they really finding fulfillment? I have family members who, they had their whole life set on a certain path. They know, like say, computers or, computer engineering or something. This is, if I go to school and I do this thing, I'll get this salary and I'll get this type of life, and that's going to make me happy. And it's interesting, like knowing them now and having conversations with them, it doesn't seem very happy to me. They don't seem like they found that promised land. And really the goals that they set for themselves didn't have Christ in mind at all. And just really about just, whatever the society has set for them. And it seems like there's like a default for most people.
I'm sure if I asked a lot of parents, if your goal is to raise a doctor or a lawyer, their answer to that would be, oh, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Because many times our goals are focused on the material and less on the spiritual, or as we've talked about, the true, the good, and the beautiful. So this idea of family goals is kind of wrapped in the idea of having a vision, a complete vision for your family, which in and of itself is not a virtue, right? But there are virtues that are wrapped up in this idea of vision. And so I'm going to read, before we begin, and I throw it over your way, I'm going to read Proverbs 29:18. And it reads, "Where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint, but blessed is he who keeps the law." And so what is this idea of vision? How it is definitely, biblical in nature because it is wrapped up in virtues. So what are the virtues that really play into this?
Okay, so two questions there.
Yeah.
Because I think what you mentioned, and this is why what Thomas was talking about, that a lot of times parents have vocational goals. They don't know that's what it's called, but to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, that's the vocation. Because once they reach that, then what? So that's why there's a sense that's long term, because it's going to take a while, but it's short term because that can't be the end. And I think that's why having a sense of vision is having that more ultimate end in mind. What is the vision? Where is this going? That when all is said and done, that we know that we have completed and done something good. And part of that involves the steps that get you there. And so that's why even when we were asking families, what is the goal for your family? Most people don't think about having a goal or having a vision for the year. And then what about, while they're young? What about when they're middle schools, high schools? Like we just kind of like go out, and I think most parents will have a general idea of their goal is to raise a child. But what does that look like?
Yeah.
What you're raising them for, what purpose? To what ends? Just because you have it, you have to raise it? That's kind of like, well, I have a car, so I drive it. But you have kids. It's more than just, well, now you have kids, raise them. There should be, as human beings, we have different directions we can go. We have different things we value. We have, what are we shooting for? And I think that this is why a lot of parents I don't think that they're negligent. I think they just never thought about it.
Yeah.
They've
Right.
never even it's not fallen their
Well, it's not
radar. And that's
negligence, it's ignorance, right? And ignorance is it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just you don't know.
right. No one's
just
ever
don't
talked to
know.
about.
Right.
No one's ever talked to them about it.
I know you guys are parents of young kids. I am not a parent of a young kid. I've got all adults. Every one of my children are adults now. Holy cow, that's weird to say. Ooh, that was a moment. But I can't imagine if somebody would have sat me down at the beginning of raising them and asked me that question, and then kind of developed it out a little bit to this conversation that we're having right now as to why would we want to do this. And so my one of my daughters just got engaged, and I almost feel bad for the fiance sometimes because he now has to answer way more difficult questions than I ever had to answer to future father-in-law, or honestly anybody. I really, but he's thinking about these things, and I'm hoping that through asking these questions and challenging him, that maybe he can gain 25 years on me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I can't imagine if I would have done this, started these ideas 25 years ago, or even 40 years ago when my parents were asking me these questions. I can't, and the impact it would have on who I am today would be, I mean, it would be incredible.
That's kind of when I work with a lot of teenagers in my church and my own teenage sons and my daughter who is going to be 8. And yeah, for me, like I didn't have any sort of, like no one had any vision for like my life. My dad worked a lot. I didn't really know him very well. And, just, yeah, I'm like a lot of times I'm going and I'm focusing my ministry work with these individuals, and I'm like, I want you to be further along than I was at your age. Like I want you not to make all these millions of mistakes that I've made before I got to the point where I'm at now. And just like all the confusion, all the like just unnecessary suffering that I went through, either psychologically or physically, all those things that in relationships that were ruined, friendships that were ruined just because I didn't know any better. And it just, there was no vision for my life. There was no like next step. Or like my dad he was a farmer boy, and he just worked all the time, and that's kind of that's all he did. And he actually, when he passed away while he was working. And to me, that was like, just a wake up call, because he didn't find that place. He didn't find that, he didn't have that vision in his own life. And so it's like, seemed like that the sin of the father kind of trickles down to the son. And then Christ came and intervened in my life, thankfully, so that I can have a clear vision. Like, at least, I wasn't a Christian when I first had my children. And so there was a lot of correction that needed to happen, and, still needing to happen because of just, where I was at that time. And this is a big deal, especially as we talk about this for, like realizing for myself, like, that's what I was lacking, and then there's so much of that, people just, they go through life and they have children just because that's just what you do. It's like almost a biological urge. You get married and you have children, but they never really think about all the aspects of what it means to bring up children in the right way.
Right.
Or they think about, I didn't have this when I was a kid,
Yep.
so I'm going to make sure my kid has that and has the stuff.
Yeah, just the material things, yeah.
And so that's why, as we talk about goals and vision, that's why the language of virtue is so critical, because those need to be some of those goals. Like, that's what I want ultimately for my kids, the things like humility, or even recently we're talking about, we're working on fortitude, that I realized my boys could use a little toughening up in some areas, that there were some things that happened that greatly shocked me, and I was dismayed. I'm like, well, we're going to have to work on this, and it's not. It's more than just a reaction. It's one of those that now it's become a goal. Like, wait a minute, I need to make sure my boys are ready. This is how you prepare them for life. This is how you make them the kind of person who can, in relation with fortitude, they can endure the difficult things to achieve good.
Well, it's interesting you bring up fortitude, because when my girls were little, I always had the urge or the instinct to protect them, to save them, to always, allow them to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized a little, I would say like middle schoolish, when one of them would struggle with getting a B, that there might be there might be too much protection.
Yep.
And so I actually sought out opportunities, and this is going to sound terrible, but I think I've mentioned it before, for my children to fail, because my vision, although it wasn't a complete, comprehensive vision, but one of them was I wanted my daughters to have fortitude. Although that might not have been the word I was thinking, but
Same. Yeah.
I needed my daughters to fail at something so that they could experience that and even practice the idea of fortitude. And that is so contradictory to who we are as parents. But if I wouldn't have thought about that, if I wouldn't have had that vision, and my vision was minuscule to what it could have been, now that I think back on it, if I wouldn't have had that, then I would have just constantly just kept saving them, and they would be entitled little brats, and they are not.
I also think, and you're absolutely right with that, because my wife has a tendency to want to coddle, and I'm like, I'm the type of like, you just there's things you need to learn to do, because it's not good for you just to be coddled and think that everything's owed to you. Obviously.
But, well, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no.
It's not. I don't think that's your wife. I think the nature of the mother is
absolutely.
nurturing,
and
right?
I think
there's an element there that has to has to be that nurture.
Yep.
And so I always talk about, and I I'm a little more bold when I talk about certain things that may not be appropriate, but when I talk about single parenting, when I'm talking to a single parent, I always say this is not natural.
Yeah.
Like you are trying to do something that is not its intended purpose, nor is it natural. And you always want to try to pull both, but you never will. And so when we talk about your wife and that nurturing, like, yes, and we ought not fault them for that.
Oh yeah.
Because they're living out what they're so ingrained to do.
But I think that's where we have the sense of we want our children to have things easy. We want them to enjoy. We want them, these are all good things. And it appeals to our immediate sense of pleasure and joy. You don't get that as much as when your child is crying through something.
Right.
I was having to deal with this the other day. Like, that's not fun. Nobody enjoys that. But there's a greater good at work. And that's why, we have to suppress this desire, whether it's to, have the child stop crying, or, maybe we just, again, from our own sense of desires, like, I don't want to listen to my child cry, so let's give the child something.
But I think what you're pointing out is, if we don't have this family goal, if we don't have this idea of what the end looks like,
right,
then we don't know how to balance these things.
Correct.
Like we're only in the immediate. We're only in the reactionary.
We don't see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And I think
it's where you're going, but
right, because
and
that's the one thing I was going to bring up is, like, right now we're in the middle of screen-free summer, and so this is something our family does, and it's something where hold
on, I'm just laughing because a week ago one of them said, "Screen-free summer is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me." And then we were over at your house on Saturday night, and he was whining and wanting to do it. And he was like, and I was like, "You just said it was the greatest thing that's ever happened to you." Anyway.
So you got to see it in the reel. So you're my witness that it was our vision, our goal is that we want to be a family that is able to bond together. Like, it's not just put away the screens. Like, we specifically set down, how are we going to spend time together rather than watching the movie, playing the games. Okay, and so we do this as a means of part of the vision, growing the family together, but also our kids having the kind of self-control. And what you got to see was where they were kind of, we're halfway through our summer right now, and and they're like, I will say this: they have become, particularly my middle child, has become much more of a reader. Like, to the point, like, we're almost like, we're buying more books. We're like,
first
let's
off,
get
that's
a Kindle.
The one that said it, and he was talking about reading.
Right, and so
why it was the greatest thing that ever happened to him. So
because he got into reading, he's been reading all these books. But I think what happens over the course of the month is that he's like, I've read a lot, kind of tired. You wear out a little bit. But that's where we want to know we're going to see this thing through. And they asked, when is it end? And we've told them, here's the end. They have a clear end. Our goal is to build this, and then it's not like reverse Mardi Gras where we're going to be like, okay, now that it's screen-free summer, let's sit and veg in front of the TV for like all day long. It's not that. We're hoping to have built and cultivated these kinds of good habits that once screen-free summer's over, well, the screens are again used, whether it's games or movies, but again, the whole point is that we're not saturated.
Well, and your family wasn't saturated anyway. Like, you guys are pretty good with the screens anyway. I mean, you're not. I've watched other families. I'm comparatively speaking here.
But the boys wanted it. It was
Right.
it was a part of that. We talk about properly ordering our loves. We could tell there was this desire. They were always asking. And so that's why some of this has been done, is to give them the ability to moderate and realize, that if I want to watch a movie, now is a good time to do it. And if, but that's not their default.
Right.
That's not their mode of operation. And that's why part of our short-term goal for just this one season is to instill this. And the boys know it's coming. We've done this the last couple of years. And the first time we did it, this particular child, we still remember when the very first day he was on the floor rolling. He was like, "This is the worst," and he was really young, and we're like, "We're gonna have to deal with it," and we stayed the course. And this is the child now who, like, when we first started, he's like, "This is the best. I'm loving it." And it's a word to parents that sometimes you have to, as you're breaking these habits, as you have these goals, getting them started, getting them going, changing the course is very difficult.
And you guys aren't doing, like, I mean, you guys talked about it before you did it this year. You weren't doing this because it's some fad or something you read in a book once that sounded like a good idea. You're doing this because it lines up perfectly with your family goals.
Mm-hmm.
With your ultimate family vision, this here is what, I mean, you're giving them temperance, self-control. You're giving them fortitude. Halfway through, they're going to keep pushing through. You're giving them, justice, because you're spending time. Like, how many young men want to spend time with dad? You're giving them this love, this fairness, like what they desire. This is lining up with your family goals.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you could keep going with all of the other virtues that this really keys in on.
But that's why we want to let people be aware of these kinds of ideas. Like, the virtues never stand by themselves. They're often circled by all the others. And so that's why when you set these goals, that's why you need to be aware of what you're cultivating, because I think for some families where if they set the goal, okay, I want my kid to be a doctor, so we talk about like those long-term vocational goals. Well, they end up actually building vices because it all becomes about the study and the work and sacrificing relationships and these, and no, you have to study, you have to do this.
Right.
And it all becomes about achieving that one thing. And between family members I have and between people I've known who have lived their life that way, who had that kind of goal and pursued it, I have yet to find somebody who achieved their goal and was actually happy.
Right.
I think most of them, and I've heard this from people I know very well, and I've heard it from their own mouths, they were devastated. They grab it, and all of a sudden they say, "This can't be it." And that's why setting goals for the family that are higher, that are in eternal truths, and these things that are genuinely good, we need our kids to think this way now.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise they're going to pursue the things that may be, again, it's the kind of thing people will praise and that are no doubt an achievement. But when it becomes your ultimate, when that becomes your ultimate goal, your greatest good, and you get it, you realize it wasn't. It's not going to satisfy.
Well, this, I don't know, it's not as often, I don't see it as often as I used to, but I still do see it. I mean, these parents put, my kid's an honor student bumper stickers on their cars. I mean, they're focusing on, those things are good. A good student's a good thing, but it's not, if you were to ask me what I want my children to be, it wouldn't be, like, my final answer wouldn't be good student. It's so much more than that.
Because those kids are typically just a step above mediocre. If you think about it, a lot of those, in terms of my wife works in the public schools, and we have AIG was what it's called, and they can take tests well, but it doesn't mean that they have all these other attributes that a lot of them can't handle. You mentioned earlier, like they can't handle failure, like they can't handle like simple things like the. What's that?
I'm feeling attacked right
No,
now.
no. That was good. But I always joke. I always make the point. As many of those little bumper stickers you see, it's not really an honor if everybody has it.
Yeah.
But that's, again, logic.
We also have that terrific kid. Like everybody.
Right. But that whole thing, a terrific kid, we used to mock those things because, and again, this is older. I would look at those and I'm like, oh, that's all you've got is a terrific kid, while the other has the honor student. That's that old way of thinking. That was how I used to think. Like, well, that's your consolation prize. But if you did put a bumper sticker on that says, you have a terrific kid, a virtuous child, that kind of thing, and that is genuinely true and not just trite, because again, I knew some of those kids and I'm like, that's not accurate. but
My mommy thinks I'm special.
yeah. But if it is accurate, if it is good, that is to be prized above all else. Because that character, that's the kind of thing that takes with you. That's the Christ likeness. What higher goal is there than to achieve that? That's difficult. That is exceedingly difficult.
It is. But that's that ultimate. I mean, that's that all encompassing. That's the goal. That's the vision. That if we don't have that, how do we form it? So if we don't know where we're taking our children, if we don't have the vision, the map, the way ahead, how do we create the virtuous child? The virtuous adult. I think, again, I wish 20 years ago, somebody would have sat down and said, Nick, what is your family goal? Like you've taken on this immense responsibility, and what are you going to do with it? Like, what is the ultimate end here? And I don't know. I was a young man. I don't know what I would have said. I definitely would have sat there with my mouth open going, I don't know.
You look around at what everyone else is doing and you do similar.
Yeah, I read some good books. That's
how we operate, because or we do what you see on TV.
Yeah.
This is just what I hear from TV. This is what they're doing. So this is why in a big way we're just trying to, when people hear us talk about these virtues, talk about these ideas, it's not a novelty. It's like, this is, again, for us, and it's the same for us. I didn't have this 20 years ago.
Right.
None of this was on my radar. I had this vague notion of I wanted to follow Christ, and I wanted to be. I remember my prayers. I would always pray. I wanted God to use me, but what no one told me, I had no one in my life who was able to look at me and say, "Well, in order for God to use you, you need to be the kind of person that God uses." And I say that because I was saturated in these vices, these sinful mindsets and behaviors that I was working against the very thing I was praying for. And if somebody had been able to set me down, like, you want to be used, let's look at the characteristics of a disciple. Let's look at Jesus. Let's look at to be used by God in a good way, to to be clear. But no one, again, I have to put it this way, I had no one who either had that understanding because no one ever talked about it, or no one ever grabbed me by my shirt collar to say, hey, listen to me, which is what I think probably as a young man I needed. I needed somebody to grab me, get in my face and be like, I need you to listen to what I'm saying.
I desperately needed that. And finally picked up a book, and I had to look up the author. It's called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters by Meg Meeker. I picked up this book. It's written through a Christian lens, and I want to go back and reread it, but it kind of gave me a goal to be raising these young women that God had blessed me with. And so I think Meg Meeker is the one that kind of grabbed me by the shirt and kind of said, you need to think about something more than just, that what's next. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate it. I expect to see your family goals on my desk by the end of the week. so we can share them with everybody. And no, but I think it's good that you guys have them, and I would highly encourage anyone that's listening that if this is not something you've thought of, maybe it's something you should sit down and truly contemplate and put something down on paper, and not just be you as the father or you as the mother, but maybe you as a family should know where you're all going.
And look us up on the internet and reach out. We'd be glad to
We'll
have
help
some
you out
conversations.
for sure.
Yep.
Gentlemen, as always, I appreciate the conversation. You can find us on familiesofvirtue.com, on our podcast, Virtuous Roots, on all of the main streaming platforms. And we'll talk to you next time.